So, since we began this presentation, we probably mentioned hundreds of times the fact that we are presenting a framework here. It's a blueprint. Don't look at the actual solutions that we are proposing, even though they are sizable, they are based on some of the industry's best practices. But focus on this rather from the framework point of view. So we are learning how to get to a solution. How do you put together a team that comes up with the right objectives, with the right goals, with the right ideas, and how do we formulate the whole process? So, as we have shared our own expertise, our own background in other presentations as well, we have spent years, if not decades, in working for some of the largest companies in the world. And in all of their engagements, we have helped them define some of the core processes. We have addressed what they do, how they operate, and whether it's a globalization or a new product launch or a strategy to define a new product or deal with the ramifications of a failed implementation, whatever it might be. When we advise these companies, all of these engagements, all of the conversations began with a certain framework, with a certain step-by-step instructions on what we need to do, what questions do we must we ask, how do we define what the challenges are, and so that's how we operate within our business realm. And for Pakistan's presentation here, we're trying to imitate a similar model. So we're trying to come up with a set of recommendations which are based on a framework on what we could do for Pakistan. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Let's try to figure out what the framework would be that we are trying to put our weight behind. So it's not about the solution, it's about the process. As we have said multiple times, what we are proposing here is just a recommendation, perhaps, based on some of the best practices that we have followed. Obviously, a lot of research, background research has gone into these areas, but these areas are far too many for us to claim any sizable competence in all the different areas. When we're talking about 25 to 30 different areas, and then go all the way from agriculture to technology to role of media to prison reform, to religious reform, to a life or responsibilities to as an individual, as a, as an active member of the society, corruption, all these kinds of different areas. Imagine Pakistan needs focus in all these different areas, right? So what we're proposing as a part of this, the end result of this set of presentations is to develop, identify all the different areas, and then hopefully to develop a task force and responsible for each of those areas. And the task force then would get together, put their heads together, and try to identify what are some of the best practices. Maybe take some of our presentations as perhaps the starting point of their conversations, and then come up with the formula that we could start applying across the board. Okay, so if that's the objective, then what we are proposing here is a framework again for the thousand and one first time. It's the framework. So let's focus on how we get to the solution, because the same methods, the same methodology will take us to a solution tomorrow and the year after that as well. So that's important point for us to realize that is focus. Let's focus on the process. Problems, of course, will change over time. What we are facing today is different from what we faced 5 years ago, and which will be different from what we'll be facing 5 years from now. Right. So the framework is a process. The process doesn't change. Problems change, the goals will change, the context will change, the population will change, the needs will change, the priorities will change, but not the process itself. So if you can focus on learning what the process entails, we could then be in a better position to manage our steps. All right, so develop the mindset. What mindset? We should always be looking ahead. Yes, past is what has brought us to this point, and we got to acknowledge that. And yes, some past mistakes, and there'll be a point for some postmortem for us to figure out how did we get to where we are today. But the principal point of this presentation here is not to focus on the past by way and by extension to point fingers at individuals or as groups. But that defeats the purpose. We need to talk about the past so we could learn from them and not repeat the same mistakes again. So with that, we got to be looking ahead. Every problem, like a second bullet point here, every problem can be solved. Let's understand that. Let's internalize that. Every problem can be solved. We just have to start somewhere. Gather the best resources. Not everyone, not every executive. If you look at every successful company out there, they may have been started by a couple of smart individuals, but they didn't sustain, they didn't grow, they didn't become the best companies in the world just by the sheer intelligence of the founders. They brought the best resources on board. So for us to succeed as this group, we need to bring in the best resources. Let's gather the best resources. Let's figure out what they are. Let's figure out what the needs are. Let's figure out who they are and what they bring to the table. Let's focus on action. That's the next bullet point. It's not as much about um, gathering the sources and the requirement. It's also about the action. Remember, the whole notion is the point of this is if you follow the business nomenclature, if you follow how what the whole notion of innovation and disruption is, it's about the speed for action. That when you have an idea, act upon it and move forward with it. You don't just sit and analyze all the pros and cons forever. Yes, the initial analysis must happen, and obviously you got to give it a lot of due diligence and before you get started. But you cannot be perpetually in the analysis mode. There's a term for that. It's called analysis paralysis. Paralysis is what keeps you from taking an action. We do not want to be in that mode. We got to be focused. Should be on action. And then once you start working on something, try to simplify it. Try to remove some of the complexities, take a goal, divide the goal into smaller, bite sized sub goals, focus on improvement, maybe small improvements at a time. Focus on transformation. Eventually, the goal is even if the goal is a massive transformation, you don't get there in one day or in one jump. Go there by taking baby steps. So, simplification, improvement, and transformation is how we'll eventually get there. We got to start. So, again, the prior bullet point says focus on action. So what's the framework? The framework is we'll define all the 7 points here. Define the objective, define the problem, what we are facing, what we are dealing with, and what the end result that we want to get to. Define. Again, it's not just one person saying it, it's all of us as a group, as a combined entity. We must all be on the same page in terms of defining what the objectives are. Every project, there's a definition, there's a clear objective. We got to be on the same page with the objective. Plan. Plan is a series of actions that we must take to get to that final destination to reach our objective. It could be one item, it could be multiple ideas, it could be multiple parallel ideas, it could be serial ideas, whatever it would be. Plan is effectively there's a roadmap of how we will eventually get there. There must be a start point. There must be a point in time that where all of our resources have been aligned and we can start. Again, this is the principal milestone for any project that all the analysis, obviously starting required means you don't just start arbitrarily. You start because you have checked off every item on your checklist and now you're actually ready to take the first step. First step is critical, but getting to the first step means that you have exhausted every possible item on the checklist. Once you've done that, then it's a major milestone. Start the process. Before, during, and after is your detailed analysis. What we are setting out to do, what we are currently doing, is it working? Is it not working? Is it keeping us on track? Are things going off the track? Are some of the changes happening internally, externally? Should we be aware of something that's just around the corner? We got to factor in all of those changes. They'll potentially impede even our production goals. Factor them in and through this analysis do the course correction as needed or if warranted. Once we have done that, once we have done the basic analysis, that means we have defined the objective. Measure. How do you measure? How do you know if you're on the right track or not? If you're building a railway line and the line is off its path, how do you know that without measuring? So measurement is a critical part of any analysis. Once you define the goals, you need to be able to measure the deviation from the goals. And again, not all deviations are bad or wrong necessarily. We got to figure out what they are. We've got to figure out why they happen. If it's a momentary glitch because of some external factors which will not be a factor going forward, then yeah, we could perhaps just minimize the potential future impact of that and move on. But if it's something which is here to stay and we have to make a course adjustment, then we need to account for that. When a plane is flying, for example, and they just realize there's a very strong wind coming from 35 degrees up from the west, which is causing a delay in the trajectory of the plane, we need to now go against that, right? Against the flow to counter the impact of the wind. So that's the measurement. They measured the wind direction, they measured the speed, and then they adjusted the course to account for that. So therefore, this new measurement, this new change of course will then put them in the right destination, on the right path. That's the adjustment we just talked about. Once you've analyzed what your goals are, what your sub goals are, once you have measured that you are going off, and by that you came up with the formula of how much tinkering must be made to your project timeline, then you make the adjustments. And then you never pause. You resume the journey, you continue the journey, and then until you get to your end result. So that's at a very high level. That's really the framework that we have identified. So even though this is our internally developed framework, this is mimicking fairly closely to an industry standard framework, which is called DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. Let's go ahead and spend a moment or two to talk about this framework. Let's make it full screen. All right. So this is a widely used, widely practiced, industry accepted tool for problem solving. Define, measure, analyze, improve, control. So again, there's tons of research material available. If you're interested in getting to the bottom and getting more insight into this, we'll share some of the tools below as well, or reach out to us if you need any more insight on this. But at a very high level, let's just define what they are. Define the problem and the ideal in terms of the target to achieve. Very close to what we mentioned a moment ago. That you must define your objective at the beginning of the process. That's the definition part of it. Measure is how you would collect the relevant data about the process and the problem. So again, when you're starting off with something, when you're defining your objective, you must know how you would measure them. And measurement is also a reflection of what the success looks like. The next point is analyze. Analyze the process to identify the cause effect relationship between inputs and outputs. Identify the vital few root causes. Let's continue, keep going. I for improve. Determine the optimum values for key contributing process inputs. Implement solutions to eliminate the root causes. And C is for control. Establish standards and controls to sustain improvement in the long run. Again, as we said, it's an industry standard. What we are following is not exactly based on this entirely from based on every word of it. It's a similar, it's a parallel process, but again, it's not based on DMAIC principle, but it's somewhat similar. Again, as we said, if you're interested in this, we appreciate if to provide some more details below. All right. So just a final few reminders. What does it take for us to succeed? For any framework, when you are starting off with the journey and you're trying to formulate a plan, a roadmap, how do you succeed? Please have these bullet points all checked off, and then there's absolutely no reason for you to not succeed. You must have people. You must be surrounded by people with whose goals and mission are aligned. If you have got people within the same team, they're all looking in different directions in terms of what their takeaway is. You're likely to fail on the very first step. You must have people where the goals are aligned, where the interests are aligned. You must deal in collaboration. Collaboration, the textbook definition of collaboration is equal weightage to all arguments. That means everybody in a discussion group has an equal footing, has an equal stature. So there's no executive who will overrule the recommendation of a lower level worker just because they occupy a higher seat. That's not the point. The point of this is all ideas are welcome, all collaboration is welcome, and collectively as a team, we should decide which way we should go. Again, it's not about where the idea comes from. The fact is that idea is there, and we need to acknowledge that, which leads us to the next point of idea gathering. Another point that we must make about this is in the idea gathering phase, we must never discount any idea as being too outrageous, too irrelevant, or a moonshot. It may be a moonshot. Eventually, we may not end up doing it. But the fact that the idea was proposed at this point in time, we must at least add it to our list, and then further analysis will help us decide if we should do this or not. So we should just add everything that gets mentioned, that gets thrown out into the mix as a potential possibility. And then once we've got the list of ideas, prioritization and grouping of ideas together. And then, of course, once we know what direction we are going towards, once we have a good, the very first bullet point was full alignment of the goals. Once we know what the goals are, through the ideas, we now know how to get there. Define the goals, define the sub goals, define all the milestones, and they'll help us get there. And then, of course, once you've got the goal, then a detailed roadmap on how to get there, which is step-by-step instructions, who needs to do what at which point, precise moment in time, lining up the resources, availability, all of those factors, they must go into play in terms of establishing a roadmap. Resources, as we just mentioned, the role and which point in the time do they become relevant. Again, the roadmap also requires for us to take a look at the critical paths when projects don't get missed because one person missed something. Projects get missed or delayed because one person did something, that person had to happen to be on the critical path, and that and that affected what other people had to do, what other people are waiting on. Any project where someone who needs to do the work and they're waiting because somebody upstream in the process from them, they are delayed, that's potentially a room for delay. So again, we want to minimize that as project owners, as process owners, as much as possible. So resources and roles, not just we have to align them up, we need to make sure that anything on the critical path is completely addressed. And this obviously requires an absolute clarity. Everyone must be on the same page in terms of their role and objectives and what they need to do and how they would do it. Process overview. Again, clear understanding. These are many of these things. If you think about that at a macro level, they're very closely intertwined. Maybe we can replace some of the words, even some of the circles are overlapping circles. Process with alignment and process overview. They cannot be disjointed circles. Of course, there's a lot of commonalities here. Process overview, that means the resources and the roles that they're going to be performing, they must be fully aligned and meeting the process objectives. Focus on quality, not just for the end result, but of every step of the way. If you look at a manufacturing process within a company, you don't just do a quality check at the last second when the project has been assembled. You do it at every stage of the assembly, right? Because if there's a failure in one stage and you don't catch it at that point in time, the cost of repairing a failure downstream is substantially higher. So that's why I focus on quality in every step of the way, every stage. And this goes very closely with our goals and sub goals and our objectives. That a goal of an assembly let's take an assembly for a moment. Let's say that we are talking about a an auto manufacturing company, and we receive the assembly for the door. The whole door is, we are assuming that the door will work as is, so the door comes in through a shipment and we just put it on the car and we just mount it, screw it in, and we are good to go. If the door is inferior quality, the product that we've received is of inferior quality, and we don't do a thorough quality check at that precise point in time, and now the car is fully assembled, and then we stumble upon the challenges and the problems, the cost at that point in time to remediate the quality issues are substantially high. It could potentially delay our production lines. The cars will not be done sitting there missing a door because the door has gone back to the manufacturing or the sub-manufacturing site for them to retrofit what was needed. So quality is not just quality at the end result. Quality is every step of the way, and the entire focus has got to be on getting it done right the first time. And matrix. Time and time again, we have established underlined the need for defining the matrix. So when you are going towards a certain goal, you've got the objectives. How do you know if you have reached there? Without having the matrix, without having the measurement capabilities, to make sure that we are not just heading in the right direction, we are close enough to that we don't have to make any course adjustments. Matrix is important for us, not just for academic reasons, that whether we are right or not. It's about an early detection of potentially falling off the path of the track. The earlier we can catch it and we can adjust it, the better we will be in the long run. Okay, all right. So now we have defined successfully, hopefully, the framework. If there are again any questions, we would love to engage you on this. It's one of our favorite topics. We've got a lot of research material, courses, working on a couple of books for our business clients. We would love to share them with you as well if there's any need or if there's any demand, any desire. But once again, to underline why we are doing this, using this as a core competence, we are trying to use the framework to put something out there that Pakistan could hopefully benefit from. All right. Okay. Let's now continue.